The Class A uniform had been folded in a cedar chest for 11 years, tucked under her late husband's bowling trophy and a Ziploc bag of her daughter's baby teeth, the way important things get buried under ordinary ones when you stop knowing where else to put them. Martha Reyes pulled it out on a Tuesday night in October, laid it flat across the kitchen table under the buzzing fluorescent light, and just looked at it for a while. The kitchen smelled like cumin and old coffee. Outside, Laredo was doing what Laredo always did in October, pretending it was still August, the air sitting thick and dumb against the windows. Her cat, a 12-year-old orange disaster named Sergeant First Class Mango, jumped on the table and sniffed the jacket. "Get off," she said. He did not get off. She scratched him behind the ear and looked at the jacket again. Army green. The old shade. Not the new digital stuff, not the modern blues. The real color. The color that meant something specific about a specific era. The brass buttons had gone slightly dull. The unit patch on the left shoulder, a small, almost deliberately forgettable thing, dark blue field with a gold numeral and a bird that looked more exhausted than proud, had faded to something between shadow and suggestion. She pressed her thumb against it. The fabric gave the way old fabric does. Memory in textile form. She got the iron. Her grandson Marco was graduating basic training at Fort Sam Houston on Thursday. 19 years old. Joined the Army the way young men from Laredo joined the Army, which is to say, a little bit patriotism, a little bit desperation, a little bit there's nothing else saying, "I am suffocating." Martha had held his face in both hands when he told her, the way her own grandmother used to do, and said, "Okay, me, Joe. Now listen to me." And she told him everything real, not the recruitment poster version. The boredom, the cold, the way your feet rot in ways they don't advertise, the specific loneliness of being 23% less of a person because the institution requires it. He nodded seriously and then said, "But you loved it, right, Abuela?" She let his face go. "Yeah," she said. "I loved it." So she was going. And she was going in uniform. Not because anyone asked her to, not because it was required or expected or even particularly appropriate for a 58-year-old retired staff sergeant from the 519th Military Intelligence Brigade to show up to her grandson's basic combat training graduation in a 20-year-old Class A jacket. She was going because Marco had looked at her and asked if she loved it, and she wanted him to see her as someone who had been that thing. Fully, without apology. The ironing took 40 minutes. She was particular about it in a way that had nothing to do with ceremony and everything to do with what her first sergeant, a woman named Patricia Dolan who had a jaw like a railroad spike, had taught her in 1992 about what it means to present yourself. "The uniform doesn't speak for you," Dolan used to say. "It speaks instead of you. Make sure it's saying what you mean." Martha steamed the lapels, replaced a loose thread on the left cuff with 3 precise stitches using a needle she'd had for 30 years. Polished the brass until it held her reflection, a small, warped version of herself, face like a fist, hair silver now at the temples, and not apologizing about it. She pinned the ribbons on in the correct order. She knew the correct order the way she knew her own Social Security number, not by thinking, just by knowing. The rows were modest. She hadn't been a decorated soldier in the flashy sense. What she'd done had no ribbon. What she'd done had a classification level and a file somewhere in a basement in Fort Meade that she was not allowed to discuss, and that was its own kind of decoration. Last, the patch. She looked at it a long time before she pinned it back. 519th Military Intelligence Brigade. The burr on the patch, a phoenix, technically, though it looked more like a pigeon having an existential crisis, had been a joke among the unit. "Our bird doesn't look like it rose from anything," her bunkmate Celine Cruz used to say. "Looks like it fell out of a tree and decided to walk." They'd laughed about it in Bagram in 2003 when everything was terrifying and laughter was the only currency that spent everywhere. They'd laughed about it after 2 of them didn't come home and the rest of them had to keep getting up in the morning anyway. The bird looked tired. Martha understood the bird. She pinned the patch and put the jacket on the hanger and went to bed. Fort Sam Houston in October. The ceremony grounds set up in the flat, relentless Texas way. Bleachers, flags, PA system that worked exactly well enough to be annoying. Families in their good clothes already sweating at 9 in the morning. Martha arrived alone. Her daughter Yolanda had driven down from San Antonio with the grandkids, and they'd agreed to meet at the gate, but Yolanda was 40 minutes late the way Yolanda had been 40 minutes late to everything since approximately 1987. Martha stood near the check-in tent in her Class A's and waited. She felt it before she heard it. The particular quality of attention that is not attention, but its opposite. The studied looking away, the slight lean of two people toward each other, the microarchitecture of a private joke forming between strangers. She had 26 years of military intelligence training, and she could read a room the way most people can't read a parking sign. Two young soldiers, privates, maybe PFC, first assignment, still shiny on them. That particular brand of confidence that lives in people before anything real has happened to them yet. Standing near the equipment table with coffee cups, shoulders loose, not technically doing anything wrong. One of them glanced at her. Then the other one glanced at the first one. Then the slight angling. The suppressed smile. The thing that passes between young people when something strikes them as funny and they're trying to decide how visible to let it be. She knew what they saw. She'd seen her own reflection in the car window on the way in. An older Mexican woman in an army uniform from a different century. The fabric slightly faded at the elbows, the unit patch so subdued it looked like something between a decoration and a mistake. She didn't look like an army commercial. She looked like somebody's grandmother, wearing something she maybe shouldn't be wearing, like she hadn't gotten the memo that the era was over. Martha looked at the two young soldiers. She did not look away. The first one dropped his eyes to his coffee cup. Good enough. She turned back to the gate and watched for Yolanda's blue Kia, which arrived 11 minutes later with a blown rear tire that Yolanda had apparently been driving on for 3 miles because, she explained, she hadn't wanted to be late. "You are late," Martha said. "Only a little. Your tire is dead. I'll deal with it after." Martha looked at her daughter, 41 years old, hair piled up in a bun, wearing a blouse that said Proud Army Grandma, which was technically inaccurate by one generation, and felt the specific exhaustion of loving someone who operates entirely on a different relationship with consequence than you do. "Fine," she said. "Let's go see your son graduate." They found seats in the bleachers, middle section, 8 rows up. Good sight lines. Martha noted the positioning of the reviewing stand, the formation markers, the route the graduates would march. Old habit. She couldn't stop doing it. She'd once been caught mapping the exits of Applebee's in Killeen, and her husband Rogelio had said, "Martha, I am begging you." And she'd said, "I'm just looking," and he'd said, "You're never just looking," and he had not been wrong. The ceremony began. The trouble started at the refreshment tent afterward. These things always have a refreshment tent afterward. Tables of cookies that taste like the concept of sweetness rather than actual sweetness. Urns of coffee that have been sitting since before anyone arrived. The general low-grade, civilian chaos of families trying to locate each other in crowds. Martha was standing near the coffee urn. She needed the coffee the way old machinery needs lubricant, not for enjoyment, for function, when a voice behind her said something. Not loud, not aggressive, conversational, almost the way things said for an audience are delivered in a tone that pretends not to be. Thing is, it's actually kind of disrespectful wearing an old uniform to something like this. Like it's out of regulation. She didn't turn around. And that patch isn't even, I don't even know what unit that is. It's so faded. Like either we're the real thing or she poured her coffee. Just feels like it's more about her than about the actual graduates. The voice belonged to someone behind her, and to her left, male, mid-30s by the resonance, officer by the cadence. The particular way officers learn to frame criticism as observation, the skill they develop, and then never unlearn. She didn't need to see him to know all of this. She'd been in rooms with that voice for 26 years. She turned around. He was a captain. Clean uniform. New ribbons. The decorations of someone who'd had a competent career in a relatively safe era. He was talking to a woman beside him, civilian probably, and he'd been performing for her in the low-key way men perform when they want to seem authoritative without seeming mean. When Martha turned, he registered her looking and had the minimal decency to stop mid-sentence. She looked at him for exactly 4 seconds. Then she picked up her coffee and walked back toward Yolanda. But her hands were doing the thing. The slight tremor that was not weakness that she'd had since 2003, that a VA doctor had written a very careful report about and then filed somewhere. Not weakness, just the body's way of keeping a record of things the mind has moved past. She wrapped both hands around the coffee cup. Mijo, she thought. Mijo, you better march good today, because I need something to look at, that isn't this. He came through the crowd still in formation mode, that specific stiffness new soldiers carry in their body for the first few months like they're auditioning for the role of themselves. Chest out, chin up, arms swinging at the precise army-regulated 8 inches. Then he saw her, and it broke open. He walked faster, and then he was hugging her, and he smelled like military-issue soap, and new boot leather, and her grandson, which is to say like her daughter's kitchen, and the backyard where she'd watched him fall off a bicycle 600 times in summer. Abuela. He pulled back and looked at her. His eyes went to the uniform. You wore it. I said I would. I didn't know if you would actually. When have I not done what I said? He thought about this with the concentrated effort of someone who knows the honest answer might be never, but wants to confirm it with available evidence. Never, he said. Correct. He looked at the jacket again. Slower this time, the way you look at something when you're trying to understand it rather than just see it. His eyes found the patch on her left shoulder. What unit is that? 519th Military Intelligence Brigade. What did you do? Intelligence work. She said it the way she always said it, which was in a tone that communicated the sentence was complete. He accepted this the way he'd been accepting versions of that answer his whole life. He'd learned early that Abuela had a room in her that was just a door. You could knock. She wasn't going to open it, but she'd stand right there by it, which was its own kind of answer. It looks good, he said. He meant it. She could tell because Marco Reyes, from approximately age 7, had been constitutionally incapable of delivering a compliment he didn't mean. He'd once told his third-grade teacher her hair looked like a bird's nest in a tone of pure descriptive honesty that had required a parent conference. Thank you, Mijo. She put her hand on his face the way her grandmother used to do. You marched good. I marched excellent. You marched good. Abuela, don't argue with a staff sergeant. You're retired. The retirement is of the body, not the rank. He grinned. Rogelio's grin, the one that always arrived a half-second before the rest of his face, understood the joke. Rogelio had been gone 4 years now, and sometimes it ambushed her from the inside, seeing his expressions on someone else's face. Not pain exactly. More like the way you feel when you find a 20 in an old coat. Something you lost showing up where you didn't expect it, and your hands go still for a second. Her hands went still for a second. She took them back from his face. Go find your mother, she said. She's somewhere looking confused about where she parked. The conversation between the captain and someone she hadn't seen before reached her in pieces. The way sound carries weird and open-sided tense over the ambient noise of 200 families. She wasn't trying to hear it. She caught it the way you catch your name in a crowded room. Not by listening, just by biology. I'm just saying the uniform standards exist for a reason. A different voice now. Also male. Also officer-shaped by the tone. Out of reg in like 3 separate ways, if you count the ribbon placement. She was standing with Yolanda, holding a cookie that tasted like flour's abstract concept of sweetness, half listening to Yolanda explain the tire situation in a level of detail that the tire situation did not warrant. And honestly, if she served, she should know better than to come out looking like Yolanda noticed. She had her mother's face, Yolanda. Same jaw, same dark eyes, the same ability to read a room through walls. She stopped mid-sentence about the tire and looked at Martha. Mama. I'm Fina. You have the face. I don't have a face. You absolutely have the face. The specific face you made when the VA put you on hold for 45 minutes and then disconnected. Martha ate her terrible cookie. Outside, a child was running in circles for no discernible reason, the way small children run, as if they've just discovered motion and aren't ready to stop testing it. They're talking about the uniform, she said. I know. Yolanda's voice did something complicated. Do you want to go? Did she want to go? She thought about the iron. The 40 minutes the night before. The needle and the 3 stitches on the left cuff. The cedar chest and the bowling trophy, and the Ziploc bag of baby teeth. The way she put the patch on last, slow, pressing her thumb into the faded bird. No, she said. Yolanda nodded once, the way soldiers' daughters nod when they understand that the conversation is complete. Here is the thing about the 519th Military Intelligence Brigade's patch that nobody in that refreshment tent knew. The patch was designed in 1967. It was updated very slightly in 1989. It was updated again in 2001. The 2001 update was small, an almost invisible alteration to the bird's wing configuration, a half-millimeter shift in the placement of the unit number. Most people who'd served under that patch didn't notice the change. Most people who'd never served under it couldn't have told you what the patch looked like at all. The 2001 version, the one Martha was wearing, had been worn by fewer than 300 soldiers. The 519th had been restructured in 2004. Most of what they'd done between 2001 and 2004 lived in files that were still classified, in rooms that required clearances that most people in the refreshment tent would never achieve in their careers. Martha knew this about her patch the way she knew the 3 stitches on her left cuff. Not by thinking about it, just by knowing it. What she didn't know, what she had no way of knowing, standing in that tent eating a cookie that tasted like a fire alarm, was who was walking in through the south entrance at that exact moment. She heard the change in the room first. A subtle thing, a recalibration of attention, the way a crowd shifts when something with weight enters it. Not a celebrity sighting shift, breathless and electric, something more serious. The kind of shift that happens when someone walks into a room who has earned a specific quality of space. She turned because her body turned before her brain asked it to. Brigadier General. 1 star on the shoulder. Dress blues. A chest that looked like a map of somewhere very complicated. Ribbons stacked in rows. The kind of accumulation that only comes from a very long time doing very difficult things. He was in his early 60s, maybe. Black hair gone steel at the sides. A face that looked like it had been rearranged by weather into something more useful than handsome. He was moving through the tent with an aide at his elbow, and the relaxed deliberateness of a person who has been the most serious person in most rooms for decades. He was looking at the graduates' families. The general sweep of a person scanning a crowd the way you scan a crowd, when you're looking for someone you'll recognize when you see them, without knowing who it is yet. Martha looked away, ate the last of the terrible cookie. Wished she had more coffee. She didn't see the moment he stopped. Yolanda did. Mama, Yolanda said, in a voice she hadn't used since the time she was 14 and had accidentally thrown a baseball through the kitchen window and didn't know what was about to happen next. Martha looked up. The Brigadier General was looking directly at her left shoulder. Not at her, at the patch. He went very still in the way of a person who has just seen something that doesn't compute on first pass. His head tilted, barely a degree, the kind of involuntary movement a face makes when the brain is doing something urgent. His aide said something to him, and he raised one hand, a small gesture that meant give me a moment, without taking his eyes off the patch. Then he walked toward her. Martha Reyes did not startle. She had not startled since a forward operating base outside Kandahar in November of 2003, and that particular night had used up her startling capacity for the remainder of her life. But she felt something when he crossed the tent toward her, something she didn't have a name for right away, the way you smell something and your whole body remembers something before your mind gets there. He stopped in front of her, close enough for conversation, far enough for courtesy. He looked at the patch. Then he looked at her face. Then he looked at the patch again with an expression that was not readable in the way generals' expressions are not readable, which is to say, it was readable if you knew the language, and the language was grief worn smooth by time into something quieter. 519th, he said. Not a question. Yes, sir, Martha said. What years? 99 to 04. Something moved across his face. Quick, gone. Bagram, he said. Her hands, the tremor, under control, both wrapped around the empty coffee cup. Yes, sir. The captain who'd been talking, the out-of-reg comment, the more about her than the graduate's comment, had drifted into Martha's peripheral vision. She didn't look at him. She felt him register what was happening, the way you feel weather change, and go very still. The Brigadier General's eyes hadn't left her face. What was your function? He said. She told him. 2 sentences. The way you describe something classified to someone with sufficient clearance. Compact, exact, no decoration. His jaw moved. Something working in it that didn't make it to his expression. I know what your unit did in that theater, he said. He said it quietly, the kind of quietly that doesn't need volume because it has weight. I know what that patch cost. Martha looked at him. The tent and the families and the cookies and the PA system still playing something militarily upbeat, and Marco somewhere finding his mother, and the blown tire, and the captain who didn't know, and the terrible coffee, all of it at a distance. Far away and getting further. There's not many of you left, the general said, from that specific window. No, sir, she said. There aren't. I lost soldiers to what your unit found, he said. I mean that the other way. What you found saved them. He paused. I don't know your name. Reyes, she said. Martha Reyes. Staff Sergeant, retired. He extended his hand. She took it. Brigadier General Dale Whitmore, he said. Not performing it. Just saying it, the way you say your name when it's simply your name and nothing more. It's an honor to meet you, Sergeant Reyes. And there it was. The thing that came out of nowhere, the way the things you haven't prepared for always come out of nowhere. Honor. She hadn't been called that in 11 years. The tremor in her hand stopped. Just like that. The way a sound stops when a source stops. She became aware that her hands had stopped shaking, and she didn't know what to do with that, with the stopping of a thing you've stopped expecting to stop. So she just held the general's hand a moment longer than a standard handshake, and he let her, and neither of them mentioned it. And that was the most military thing that happened all day. The aide behind the general was writing something. The captain who'd been talking about her uniform was no longer visible in Martha's peripheral vision. She didn't look for him. My grandson just graduated, she said. Marco Reyes. Be company. You should be proud, the general said. I am, she said. He asked me if I loved it. The service. What did you tell him? She thought about the iron, the 40 minutes, the needle, and the 3 stitches. The faded bird that looked like it fell out of a tree. The room in her, that was just a door. Yeah, she said. I loved it. The general nodded in the way that means, I know exactly what you mean by that, and I know how much it cost you, and I'm not going to ask you to explain either part. Yolanda, behind Martha, made a sound that was not quite a breath and not quite a word. Martha did not turn around. She was not ready to let anyone see her face yet. He was with 3 other new soldiers his age, doing the thing young military men do when they just survive something together, talking loud and leaning into each other's space, the specific territorial looseness of boys who've just figured out that they can. He saw her coming and disentangled himself without being asked. She'd always liked that about him. He read rooms the way she read rooms, and she never told him that was her, in his blood, but she knew it. You okay? He said. Why would I not be okay? Because you have a different face than before. I have the same face I've always had. Ebola. He said it the way his mother said it. 2 syllables that somehow contained an entire argument they were choosing not to have. I saw the general talking to you. From across the tent. I couldn't hear, but I could see, and he stopped. Your hands stopped shaking. She looked at him. He'd noticed the shaking. He'd always noticed the shaking and never mentioned it in 26 years, which told her everything she ever needed to know about what kind of person he was going to be in uniform. He knew the patch, she said. Marco looked at her left shoulder. At the tired bird. What does that mean? It means he knew what it was. What we did. What cost? She paused. There aren't many people left who know. From that specific time. What did you do? In a unit. The door in her. The closed room. She looked at her grandson, 19 years old, his whole service ahead of him, the long, complicated, beautiful, brutal thing of it all waiting on the other side of today. She thought about Patricia Dolan and her railroad spike jaw and the uniform speaks instead of you. She thought about Celine Cruz laughing about the Pigeon Phoenix in Bagram at 3 in the morning, laughing the way you laugh when the alternative is something you can't survive. She thought about the 2 who didn't come back, and the files in Fort Meade, and the classification level, and the particular loneliness of being the only people in any room who know what you know. We found things, she said, before they happened, so that other soldiers got to come home. Marco went still. Like that, she said. Exactly like that. He looked at the patch again. The exhausted bird. The faded gold numeral. The thing that had looked to 2 young privates, and a captain like an old woman's mistake, like something that should have stayed in a cedar chest. Does it have a name? The bird. It's a phoenix. Officially, it doesn't look like a phoenix. No, it doesn't. It looks like he searched. He was his grandmother's grandson. He'd find the right thing. It looks like a bird that went through something real and just kept going anyway. Not because it healed, because it didn't have a choice. Martha looked at her grandson. She'd been holding something in her chest since the moment the general set on her, holding it the way you hold something you found, and aren't sure yet whether to keep. It had been sitting there through the tent and the walk and Yolanda's tearful hug that Martha had endured for approximately 12 seconds before gently detaching and saying, "Stop it, I'm fine," and Yolanda saying, "You're crying," and Martha saying, "I am not crying. I have something in both eyes simultaneously, which is different." "Yeah," she said to Marco. She put her hand on his face one more time. "That's pretty much exactly what it looks like." The captain found her. She was standing near the edge of the tent, cup of fresh coffee, watching the crowd thin as families drifted toward the parking lot. Yolanda had taken the other grandkids to find food. Marco was somewhere saying goodbye to his unit friends in the particular dramatic way of soldiers who are about to see each other in 3 days, but are performing as if it might be never. The captain came to stand near her. Not close. To her left, a respectful distance, facing the same direction she was facing, the way people stand when they're not sure they're welcome, but are coming anyway. She didn't look at him. "I owe you an apology," he said. She drank her coffee. "What I said before, I heard you," she said. He stopped. "I heard all of it," she said. The regulation comment. The more about her than the graduate's comment. "I heard it." Silence. "I didn't know," he said. "What the unit was. What you should have defaulted to respect before you knew," she said. She said it the same way she would have said your shoelace is untied. A statement of fact, no malice, no performance. "You're an officer." You were talking about a veteran in her own branch's uniform at her family's graduation ceremony. "What you knew or didn't know about the patches," she stopped. "Let the sentence hang." He was quiet for a long time. "You're right," he said. Martha looked at him now. Captain, mid-30s. Decent face, when it wasn't being used to perform for someone. The look of a man who was trying to figure out whether to feel bad or look good about feeling bad, and was slowly choosing the harder of the two options. "My grandfather served," he said. "Cordell. He had this old uniform too, and as a kid, I thought it looked so old, and he exhaled. I didn't get it then either." Martha looked at his face. She thought about all the things she could say. The files in Fort Meade. Celine Cruz laughing at 3 in the morning. The two didn't come back, and what they found before they didn't come back, and what that finding meant for how many other families got to do exactly this. Stand in a hot tent in Texas eating terrible cookies, and watch their kid march. She thought about all of that. "Go call your grandfather," she said. He blinked. He passed. 8 years ago. "Then go call someone who knew him," she said, "and ask them what the old uniform meant, before you decide what it looks like." He nodded. "Once. The real kind." She turned back to her coffee. Yolanda found her 15 minutes later. "There's a thing happening," Yolanda said. "There's always a thing happening." "No, Mama," Yolanda made a gesture that translated roughly to just come, and Martha, because she had been coming when Yolanda made that gesture since 1984, came. The thing happening was this: Marco, standing with his unit near the flagpole, talking to 2 other soldiers. Next to him, the Brigadier General. Not officially. He wasn't in formation, wasn't commanding anything, wasn't on any schedule that required him to be standing in a circle with 4 new soldiers near a flagpole after a graduation ceremony. He was just there, talking. And what Martha could see from across the 50 feet between them was the way Marco's whole body was listening. That specific quality of attention that means your body has understood that the person talking to you has something real in them, and it would be a waste to let your mind wander. She stopped. The general was gesturing at something on his own chest. A ribbon, maybe, telling them something. The 4 young soldiers around him were utterly still in that way young people are still when they're being given something they didn't know they were waiting for. Yolanda put her hand through Martha's arm. "He came to find Marco," Yolanda said. "The aide told me. He asked someone which recruit was Staff Sergeant Reyes's grandson." Martha watched the general. She watched her grandson. The afternoon light was doing that October Texas thing. That brief 10-minute window where the light goes amber instead of white, and everything looks a little like a photograph taken by someone who knew what they were doing. Marco was standing in it, 19 years old, in his uniform, listening to a man with 40 years of service tell him something that Martha would never know the exact words of, and she was glad she wouldn't know. Some things that belong to the young should stay there, unnarrated by the older. He didn't have to do that, Yolanda said softly. No, Martha said. Why did he? Martha watched the general. Watched him the way you watch someone who's doing something good and doesn't know they're being watched, which is the only pure version of a good thing. Because he knew the patch, she said. And when you know the patch, she stopped. When you know what it cost, you don't let it stay in a cedar chest. Even after, Yolanda squeezed her arm. Martha let her. Marco walked her to the car. Just the two of them. Yolanda was dealing with a tire situation, which had escalated from a problem to an event in the way Yolanda's problems always escalated. The parking lot was hot and half empty, the ceremony officially over, the army already becoming a past tense thing for the family members driving back to their ordinary lives. At the car, Marco turned to her. What did he tell you? She asked, before she meant to. The general, when you were at the flagpole. Marco was quiet for a moment. He said that the people who do the work no one knows about are the ones who make everything else possible. He paused. He said there's a type of courage that doesn't come with a crowd watching. He said it's rarer than any decoration he's ever pinned. He looked at her left shoulder. At the bird. He said he'd met one of those people today. Martha looked at her grandson. She looked at the patch. The tired phoenix that wasn't a phoenix. The bird that looked like it fell out of a tree and just kept walking. Celine Cruz, who'd laughed about it until she couldn't anymore, and then had kept getting up anyway. Patricia Dolan and her railroad spike jaw. 26 years of being the specific kind of person who goes into rooms no one else goes into, and finds things no one else finds, and comes back carrying what they found, and tells no one, and keeps carrying it. The bird wasn't tired. She understood that now, looking at it. The bird looked like it had been carrying something heavy for a long time, and had simply made peace with the carrying. Okay, she said. Abuela, I know, you're doing the face. I'm not doing any face, Mijo. You're doing the I have something in my eyes again, she said. Simultaneously, it's a medical condition. Marco laughed. His grandfather's laugh. Late and bright and absolutely sure of itself. She pulled him in and held him for a moment. Not the way she'd held him as a child, the fearful clutch of a grandmother doing inventory of a small body, counting the parts, but the way you hold someone when you're handing them something you've been carrying for a long time, and you're finally ready to let someone else take their share of it. Listen to me, she said, into the collar of his uniform. When it's hard, and it will be hard, the kind of hard that nobody talks about in the recruiting office, you find a thing you love about it. You hold on to that. You iron the jacket. She felt him nod against her shoulder. You wear the patch. She let him go. He was 26 years younger than her, and half a foot taller, and his whole service was ahead of him, and she was terrified and proud in equal measure, the way every soldier's family member is terrified and proud, the two feelings braided so tight you can't find where one ends. Yes, ma'am, he said, quietly. The first time he'd ever said it to her. The rank and the love both at once in 2 syllables. She got in the car. She drove home. That night, she put the uniform back on its hanger. Not in the cedar chest. In a closet, on its own hook, where she could see it when she opened the door. She stood in the kitchen under the buzzing light, and Sergeant First Class Mango wound around her ankles with the commitment of a cat who has decided this is his purpose for the evening. She thought about what Marco said. A bird that went through something real and just kept going. Not because it healed, because it didn't have a choice. She put her coffee cup in the sink. She turned off the light. In the dark, she stood in her kitchen in Laredo and thought about Patricia Dolan and Celine Cruz and the 2 who didn't come home and the files in Fort Meade and a brigadier general standing with 4 young soldiers near a flagpole in the amber October light telling them the thing she'd never been told in 26 years, that it mattered, that it counted, that there's a type of courage that doesn't come with a crowd watching, and it is rarer than any decoration. She thought about how she'd walked into that tent that morning with a jacket from 2003 and a faded patch that 2 people smirked at and a captain dismissed out loud, and she'd held the coffee cup with both hands and thought, Mijo, we better march good.